Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is a much more solemn environment than we're used to for the poetry slam, for the translation slam. It's been, for the past 5 years, we've had it at the Bowery Poetry Club. So I'd like to ask for a moment of silence for the Bowery Poetry Club. I think that the best tribute that we could pay to it maybe would be to give you all pieces of chalk and urge you to write on all these black walls everywhere, the kinds of things that I found in the bathroom there. But I think that that might end the slam a little bit earlier than it's supposed to be. My name is Michael Moore. I am the host of this evening. I am terrible at introductions and even worse at expressing gratitude, but I will do my best. I am not the Michael Moore, I am the Michael Moore. Najwan Darwish is not Mahmoud Darwish. But Staceyann Chin, as she signs her emails, is no abbreviations, no variations, and please note the spelling. This year I said, you guys had better give me some good poets for the slam. And I think that I really hit the jackpot. We're very lucky to have with us two very exciting poets, very different and very similar in a way. And I'll sort of ask you to sort of make the comparisons. We have here with us Najwan Darwish, a Palestinian poet, and we have Staceyann Chin, born in Jamaica and living for now in the United States. But I'd like to begin with my thank yous. I'd like to thank the Public Theater for having us and replacing, again, the sadly demised Bowery Poetry Club. Jakob Orshos and Beth Weinstein of the Pan American Center, the Penn Translation Committee. On the personal side, I really want to thank Nahid Mozafari, who helped me find two wonderful translators from the Arabic. In order to do this, I sort of find out, so please everyone, I don't know if we have a very big group. Nahid is from the Department of Middle Eastern and Islamic Studies at NYU, and I sort of went to her hat in hand saying, do you know any Arabic translators? And yes, indeed, she did. Then I don't believe that he is here tonight, but Joseph Shore from the Calandra Italian-American Institute at Queens College. For the second part of the program, Staceyann will be translated into Italian. And I said, do you know any dynamic sort of, rap-style Italian poets here in New York? And, I think that you'll be pretty happy with what we came up with. So let me, with that, explain a little bit of the program. It's in two parts. The first part will be Arabic. Najwan will read, followed by the translations. They will talk to each other. Then we will open up to questions from the audience. You should all have copies of the text, and you can sort of see them. We put them in parallel if you want to do some comparisons. It's a little bit dark right now, but the lights will come up. And in the second half, Staceyann will read, followed by three translators in this case, because we were very lucky to have among us this week a translator who lives in Italy, Cristina Farah, and I decided the more the merrier, which was my own family saying. So let me begin with my introductions. Najwan Darwish is one of the foremost poets working in the Arabic language. His poetry has been translated into 10 languages. I don't know if the number is being increased tonight or if it's even going up as we speak. I'm sure he's heard this 1,000 times, which is why I hate doing introductions. But in 2009, which was how many years ago? 4? Well, in 2009, Hay Festival Beirut 39 named him one of the 39 best Arab writers under 40. I don't know if that is still the case. He is a literary advisor to the Palestinian Festival of Literature, and as a matter of fact, on these beautiful days, he's been holed up in his hotel, he tells me, preparing for this festival. He has a book coming out in English of his poetry next year from New York Review of Books. Tomorrow he will be at the New School Tishman Auditorium at 3 p.m. for a panel called Palestinian Writers in Conversation, moderated by Judith Butler. I think it's great to have him here because it's already controversial to even use the word Palestine in New York City, at least, and in America. And when we do talk about Palestine, we talk about it, but we don't hear from it. We don't hear very much Arabic, period. We just hear sort of commentators talking about it. So I think it's, first of all, just fantastic to hear someone speaking Arabic in this city. And speaking not of politics necessarily, but just to show you a little bit of this civilization that has been shut off from us. I think it's great. His two translators will be Ryah Aqel, a Palestinian American who just handed in her master's thesis this week, I believe, so congratulations to her. And Ahmad Diab, a Fulbright scholar. He earned his BA in English literature from Damascus University. I should add, with all of these sort of academic credentials, that I think tonight will be another kind of schooling altogether. He is currently finishing his PhD at NYU on representations of Arabs in Palestinian imaginary and translating the poetry of the Syrian poet Al-Maghut. I would like to ask the three of you to come to the stage, please.
فوبيا. سيطردونني من المدينة قبل هبوط الليل. يقولون إني لم أدفع لهم فاتورة الهواء ولم أدفع أجرة الضوء. سيطردونني من المدينة قبل حلول المساء. يقولون إني لم أدفع أجرة الشمس ولا مستحقات الغيوم. سيطردونني من المدينة قبل شروق الشمس لأنني أمعنت في مناكفة الليل ولم أرفع مدائحي للنجوم. سيطردونني من المدينة قبل نزولي من الرحم لأنني ظللت طوال 7 أشهر أتربص بالوجود وأكتب الشعر. سيطردونني من الوجود لأنني منحاز إلى العدم، وسيطردونني من العدم لأنني على صلة مشبوهة بالوجود. سيطردونني من الوجود والعدم لأنني وليد الصيرورة. سيطردونني. إعلان. أحتاج إلى مدير صارم وسكرتيرة نشيطة ومراسل يصنع القهوة والشاي. أحتاج إلى مفكر وشاعر وزعيم وعراب مافيا ليتقاسموا حياتي. وبعد قليل مثل الشركات سأعلن إفلاسي. أحتاج إلى خادم وخائن. أحتاج عشيقة تدبر لي مقتلة قباقيب في الحمام، وملكة تخونني مع الملك. شكرا.
Phobia. They will chase me out of the city before nightfall, saying I did not pay the wind bill, and I did not pay the light's fee. They will chase me out of the city before evening comes, saying I did not pay the fee for the sun or the dews for the clouds. They will chase me out of the city before sunrise, because I kept harassing the night, and I did not offer my praises up to the stars. They will chase me out of the city before I leave the womb, because I stayed 7 months awaiting existence and writing poetry. They will chase me out of existence because I tend towards absence. They will chase me out of absence because of my suspicious link to existence. They will chase me out of existence and absence because I was born of becoming. They will chase me out. Advertisement. I need a stern manager, a lively secretary, a messenger who makes coffee and tea. I need an intellectual, a poet, a charismatic leader, a mafia godfather to partition my life. After a while, like a company, I'll announce my bankruptcy. I need a servant, and a traitor. I need a lover that will arrange for a murder by bathroom clogs, and a queen that will betray me with the king.
Phobia. They will evict me from the city before the dark. They say I did not pay my air bills. I did not pay the price of light. They will evict me from the city before the evening time. They say I did not pay the sun's fees or the clouds' dues. They will evict me before the sunrise, because I used up the night without praising the stars. They will evict me from the city before I leave the womb, because for 7 months I scrutinized existence and wrote poetry. They will evict me out of existence because I sided with the void. They will evict me out of the void because I'm suspect of contacting existence. They will evict me outside existence and the void because I am the son of becoming. They will evict me. Classifieds. A strict manager is needed, a hard-working secretary, a messenger boy who can make coffee and tea. An intellectual is needed, a poet, a chief, and a mafia godfather to split a life. Then, in a little bit of time, they will declare someone's bankruptcy. A servant is needed, a traitor, a mistress to arrange an elaborate murder, and a queen to betray me with the king.
I'd like to start off the questioning with a question to Najwan. I've been getting to know Najwan this week a little bit. I think we're becoming friends, but before we can become friends, we have to have a fight, I think, right? And then if we can repair from the fight, then we will be friends forever. I'm not saying that I'm going to have a fight, but you said something very interesting to me yesterday. You said, I always tell my translators that they should take advantage of the fact that I'm not dead. Could you elaborate on that a little bit?
But I did not tell you what they do answer, because what I really believe, the only thing about having the poet alive for the translator is to get some help from the poet, some explanations, some mysterious things in the poem, why the poet is using this word, not that, etc. This would be so helpful. So I was trying the other time to I was feeling that I'm helping the translator very much, and I was trying to, to not take advantage, somehow to. So I told him, the good thing that I am alive. You always could ask me, the other ones you are translating, the dead ones, we are suffering. He said to me, yes, this is right, but you, in the same time, the good thing about dead poets that they can't complain, and they would, I would do what I want. So from one side, you are helping me, but also you are like cares for me. Whatever wrong I did, you would find it out and you would scandal me. So this is the thing of having the poet. But I think still, it's better to have the poet alive, because when he's dead, there is some advantages of having the poet alive.
Well, I think I totally understand Najwan's anxiety, and it's the anxiety of both a Palestinian over-representation and anxiety of a Palestinian over life itself. I'm guessing that Najwan didn't want to be misrepresented, and since he is a Palestinian, Palestinians are usually denied a lot of the basic rights of representing themselves. It's a completely legitimate concern on his part to want his words to be represented to the letter, to the way he meant them to be. There's a historical complaint on the part of and this is where I speak both as a Palestinian, as a translator, where we've been misrepresented. And for a Palestinian poet to be a little maybe overzealous or guarded regarding his words, that's legitimate.
But if I may intervene, the Palestinians have no monopoly on that, okay? I mean, I was at a translators colony, actually, and everyone was working with a living writer who was there with them, and I was working with a dead writer, and everyone was so jealous of me. So, and I think that sometimes the danger of I think that many discourses, many arguments regarding translation are actually pretty much across the board. I think that poets in general are very protective. Poets, writers, and people being translated. I mean, it's just like their child is leaving their grasp and someone else is going to raise it, you know? I mean, I don't know, unless you think that there's some other, please?
What Ahmad mentioned is my concern, but out of poetry. In poetry, I have different concern, which is the craft, the art of poetry, how much it works in the foreign language. I don't know much languages, and even I don't speak any foreign language. I'm just speak Arabic, and even now I have a sort of Google translator in my head. So I would think in Arabic, and I would translate and to you. So the machine is here. So I'm not mastering any foreign language. With English, with French, I'm just translating in my head. But I insist on revisioning my work in any foreign language, in Korean, in Swedish, and I would argue with the translator, and I would find mistakes, and I would interfere, and always find my way to say something and to contribute. And my main concern is how it would be still poetry in a different language. And in many times, I would tell the translator, do whatever you want. The important thing to have it good. So we do betray the original text, and the ones who are looking on my text sometimes in English, they say to me, but this line does not exist in the Arabic. I said, yes, it doesn't, but I added for the English. So the poem would work. And with some few texts, I love the text in the foreign language, and some improvements happened on the text in the foreign language, which is in some of the texts are better from the Arabic, and for this reason, you would find a lot of bad poets in their language. They are good in foreign language. I'm not talking about myself, of course, but some other bad poets who do translate it into English. Sometimes I would wonder how this could be translated into English. This is really bad poetry in Arabic. It sucks in Arabic. How it works in English. But when you find that Marlon Hacker is translating him or her, that would become a good poetry after the translation of Marlon Hacker. And she already also translated some of my poems, but I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about others. So it is like this. Representations in poetry is something different. No poem would be, no poetry translator could be loyal. Loyalty is a tricky word in translating poetry. The question is, does it work in the foreign language? Is it still poetry? Is it effective? Is there any energy in the text? This is the main concerns of translating poetry.
And Ryah, with that, I'm reminded actually of something that Julia Kristeva said at a conference years ago. She said that the translator is a bigamist, you know, so loyal to two partners. Ryah, with the fact that Najwan is very much alive, sitting next to me and across from you, do you have any questions for him?
I think everyone has this question. The story behind the kubkab, the bathroom clogs. I think maybe that one is the most pressing question. But yeah.
Yes, we had a conversation over the phone about that, and he was saying, how do you say wooden sandals in English? And I could think of it in Italian, which has all kinds of connotations, and then he gave me the story. The clogs.
The clogs. Actually, in a certain period in Arab Islamic history, there were some mistresses who managed to kill their lovers. And usually it was happening in the bathroom and in those wooden sandals, or by asking the female servant to jump on the lover and kill him. So I found it beautiful somehow, beautiful end for someone. This is a sort of flashy betrayal which one would like to have in his life, because these ordinary betrayals are not really working. And I noticed that I asked Michael about this word. He told me clog.
Yeah.
Clog, okay. So I noticed that Ahmad throw the clog is not anymore there.
Which is a kind of, to throw the clog is kind of, that's sort of,
I'm betraying.
like
I'm faithful to the act of betrayal in the line.
yes, it's a sort
So
of
I'm betraying the way he represented betrayal.
Yeah, but I like in Ahmad translation he made her a mistress, which is I think it is the word ashiqa. It's mistress and it's not a lover. A mistress, like also in other languages, it has a certain psychology and it's not the lover. Ryah is more romantic. She made her lover, and I think as a female she was standing with the mistress and she transformed her into a lover. And here you could see the gender issue in translation.
Ryah, would you care to?
I did take ashiqa as lover because of the root, the ashaqa. So I took it as the strongest form of love. And I wanted to sort of pick up on the theme of gender in this poem, especially how many Arabic readers are out there? Okay. If you look at the Arabic, do you have the Arabic? Okay.
We're sort of ready for questions from the audience, so if you could actually give the people some light.
I just wanted to, when I was translating, I noted that there were three feminine nouns in this poem. It was secretary, lover, and queen. So I did want to sort of pick up on that and sort of point out that in Arabic there are gender markers, but also in English, even though there aren't gendered words, that the language is still gendered in the way that we hear it. And so when you think of secretary, what do you think of? When you think of lover, who do you think of? So I think, and so that's why I sort of went away from mistress and picked lover.
And that, one of the questions that Najwan asked me over the phone was, how do you say T-boy? And I sort of got the picture, but I couldn't think of a way to say, you could say tea-boy, but this was this figure of the messenger who makes coffee and tea. Ahmad, what did you make of that?
Can I have the air?
Yes.
Messenger does exist in the Arabic. So this is as close as translation as possible. There is murasil yasna al-qahwa wal-shay. It's the only word that doesn't exist in the Arabic is boy. So I could have, that's my addition. Other than that, it says a messenger who makes coffee and tea.
Okay, but messenger in Arabic, it has a sort of religious connotation. Always the prophet is the messenger.
Yeah, that's why you need the boy.
Okay.
Oh, that's what, or if you just put boy who makes coffee and tea, maybe that would work.
And
If I would be you, I would just make it and a tea boy. Even the connotation could be different, but there isn't tea boy in the institutions. The one who's doing tea and coffee for the guests.
well, I think we talked about that, and this is one of the issues that arises in translation is how do you recreate a cultural context that does not exist in the new language? And I don't know if I have any subcontinental friends, and whether you do have such a figure as a tea boy, I wouldn't be surprised. But because he said, well, it's someone that will serve you tea in the office, not a waiter, and
I think the closest thing we have is an intern.
And I think actually that this second poem, Advertisement or Classifieds, really does sort of go to the heart of some cultural differences, because A lively secretary and a hard-working secretary are not the same thing, or I don't know. What was up with the secretary?
Nashita. Actually, the word I'm using in Arabic, nashita, is like more lively, but it's a word to describe someone who's fresh but do nothing. Sort active, yeah, somehow active secretary, but the activeness is a subject of hesitation. It's not real activeness. So it's like, and she's active, but
Well,
not
like-
really doing much things.
Agile. But for someone older.
In English, active secretary really doesn't make sense. I mean, you might talk about the bright penny, you know, you might talk about the one who looks eager to please but doesn't do anything.
I'll tell you something. What's the tragedy of this person in the poem? The one who's putting the ad. He's a person who can't manage his life, simply. It's difficult to manage your life, especially if you have much ambitions. You would suffer. You would try to be everything. And I think all those who I'm talking about, I'm sharing, it's me in the actual life. I'm playing all those roles. Because friends would ask me what you are doing nowadays. I would say nothing. I'm working secretary for myself. So, because I'm doing a lot of secretary job. Dear so-and-so, I'm happy to receive your email. Best, Najwan. And I'm doing these things as I am someone else. When I'm answering my emails, I am taking the role of a secretary. And now I am working as secretary of myself. And during the week, and I think many of you also would do those things, would play different roles. So sometimes you would reach a point that you can't handle it anymore, and you want to give your life to those different ones. But unfortunately, the ad remains an ad. No, I didn't receive any application or even any interest.
So this is exactly why in my version you'll see that it's mostly passive. The only reference to the speaker is in the passive, me, and only in the last line. Whereas in the Arabic, he appears earlier in the poem. So this is why I kept it in the passive. It goes with the genre of classifieds in English, and it goes to the heart of what the psychology of the person is.
But in the last line, you kept it me, to betray me.
Yeah, this is but for example, we'll declare someone's bankruptcy.
Yeah. But also when you left it me by the end, this is like indication.
Yeah.
That you give me a voice in the last line.
Exactly, but only in me, no I, and as a punchline in the end. Because there is no element of surprise in the Arabic. It's a little more predictable.
Ryah, I'm wondering whether it's another issue. It sort of came up in some of our conversations. Did you have any discomfort with the poem? Like, I mean, ideally, maybe ideally, like it or not, you have to identify with the narrator of whatever you're translating.
I don't think I was necessarily uncomfortable. I really like both of these poems because they have sort of an anti-capitalist tinge to them. And I think the punchline is actually, after a while, like a company, I'll announce my bankruptcy. I think that's sort of the heart of the poem, where you're dividing your life in all of these different ways, and it's a mess, and then finally you have to give up and I'm bankrupt. So you divided your life like a company, and then what happens when those pieces are too scattered? So no discomfort on my part. I really enjoyed translating these.
I'm wondering if some people in the audience might have questions. Yes.
I actually have two questions. One is
You're only allowed one, Sarah. No.
Excuse me? Okay. Just one?
No, I'm
All
just
right.
teasing.
Verse 9. My question is addressed first to the translators, then to the poet, please. You have translated the 9th verse, Ryah. After a while, like a company, I'll announce my bankruptcy. and Ahmad, you've translated it, then in a little bit of time, they will declare someone's bankruptcy. My bankruptcy and someone's bankruptcy, there's a big difference between those two. Now, I can understand small plays in word or subtleties in differences in language to go from passive to active or vice versa, but I don't speak Arabic, but I suspect that there's a big difference between my bankruptcy and someone's bankruptcy. I'd like your explanations for that, and of course, I'd like to hear from the poet and what he really meant by that verse.
And you have 10 seconds to answer.
Well, Ryah's version is the more accurate, to the closer to the Arabic. But like I said, classifies as a genre in English is usually used in the passive. And I mean, this is where I disagree with Ryah and probably with the poet, that delaying the person who's the center, the marginal center, who is being operated on until the end, gives the reader more, gives the poem more suspense factor and holds the reader's attention until the end. And at the end, you realize that we're talking about the life that's being shared, the bankruptcy, all of these different players are the me at the end. So it is a judgment call on my part. I take full responsibility for it.
Yeah, like Ahmed said, the Arabic is my bankruptcy. And I also felt that this was the heart of the poem, like I said earlier, that it's sort of a sad sentiment to say my bankruptcy, and that's why I really liked it and wanted to keep it that way. So Ahmed and I disagree on this part.
I think Ahmed couldn't translate it differently than what he did, because he switched the logic of the poem. He made it in passive, and if I would be in the place of Ahmad, I would delete this line. These two lines, I would take them off, because they are now unnecessary according to putting the poem in the passive. Because even it doesn't make sense anymore to put this in passive. The good thing of it is that someone is talking, thinking himself a bank. But so delete it, Ahmed, delete it.
Please, where's the mic? Here in the front?
Oh.
Okay, excellent.
Thank you guys both for your translation and for the wonderful compositions from the poet. I'm interested in phobia because we're dealing with a fear, and it seems like we're dealing with a fear in a liminal state. Sayatrudunani, they will do this thing, but it's because of all of these past events, because I stayed in my mother's womb for 7 months, because I didn't pay a light bill. So he's bain a bain right now. He's committed or not committed these acts and fearing a future act. So how did you deal with kind of aspect and tense in both writing this and in translating this? I think that's interesting to me.
Ryah, do you want to say? Okay. I think the main, I'll answer the question by other means, if I may, and then if you're not satisfied, we can go back. But I think the main tension here is the verb, and in Arabic is tarada yatrudu, which could be a variety of things, from expel to kick out to Ryah had it chase out, and I chose evict. And this is where a lot of the tension happens. And I actually struggled whether I should repeat the same verb or choose all of these options with each occurrence of tarada yatrudunani. At the end, I settled on evict because the poem harps on the legalistic version of things. We're talking about bills, we're talking about legal state control over being, over someone's being. So this is why I found evict, like someone's being evicted out of their apartment, would be the closest to the soul of the poem. I don't know if this answers your question about the aspect.
I think closer to it is because we're between this future and they will be. And what are the causes of this eviction? I haven't paid the light bill or the AC,
But-
or I was in my mother's womb.
But isn't the
The
big,
little space that the poet is occupying right now, he's in a place where he thinks he hasn't done anything, or he has done something, and something will happen in the future. How did you deal with negotiating that fear, that phobia that he's having?
but isn't it, I mean, a little bit more concrete than that? I mean, you say evict, she says chase out. I might say banish, someone else, I don't know. I was wondering if maybe, Ryah, you could address the verb itself, then, which that seems to be sort of the focus of your question, if I'm not mistaken.
So the verb that I choose, or the phrase, is "they will chase me out." That's what I chose. Some people, like Ahmad said, will use "kick you out," "evict," et cetera, et cetera. But to me, it was a question of agency in the verb. They will chase me out. All of the agency is given to the one doing the chasing, and running is basically what the poet is doing. And so that's why I chose that verb. For sort of the temporal liminal zone you're talking about, I viewed the womb not as sort of, he's actually coming out of the womb, or that it was a past event that happened before these other things. I viewed it as exaggeration and humor, that they have so much control over me and resources and everything that they'll even kick me out of my mother's womb. And so that's how I saw it when I was translating this exaggeration.
Najwan, the last word to you.
I don't know. Actually, in Arabic, we don't have variety words for kicking out, because it has to do with capitalism. It developed a sort of dictionary of evict and chase and all those things. Till now, in my culture, we still manual in kicking out. We didn't develop much terms and much mechanisms.
So you mean someone just takes your stuff and throws it out on the street?
Like this, like this. And the strange thing about this poem, there is a sort of phobia. The title, it's a certain phobia, and it seems that I was passing phobia when I wrote it, and I hide it 10 years, and this is the first time I'm share it. It's not published, and I'm looking on it. It's horrible because because there is someone who's feeling this phobia and he's finding excuses for them, that they say that I didn't do so and so, and all of those things are a sort of stupid things. But as an audience, what do you think? Yani, as the readers, what do you suggest?
Throwing out the poem, you mean? Or
For the word like chase or evict or kick, or what works better in English, in your opinion? Evict.
Thank you.
Chase out.
now you're getting started. You've all been very great. Do you think that Ryah and Ahmad have graduated from the School of the Translation Slam, and can we give them their certificate? Yes. In this exam, we have to move on to the second part of our program. I'm trying to be very 50-50. Thank you all very much. It was really... Thank you. And now, we're moving into staying in the Mediterranean area, let's say, going from Arabic and a little bit north into Italian, although actually literary Italian was born in Sicily, which northern Italians come to think of as part of the Arab world. So let's agree to that. For our second poet, I'm really happy to have Staceyann with us. She was born in Jamaica. I won't give your birth date. What I would like to tell everyone is to go onto YouTube, type in Staceyann Chin, and sit back, relax, and enjoy the day, because she's a phenomenal performer. She's a great reader. You might know her from Russell Simmons' you might know her from the Deaf Poetry Jam on Broadway. She's read at numerous universities, and we're really happy to have her reading and honored to have her reading with us tonight. She has 3 translators, as I mentioned. Angelo Carabelli, my colleague, a dual citizen of Italy and the United States, is a graduate of the School for Interpreters of the University of Trieste, working in Russian and Italian. Her translations include essays by Pier Paolo Pasolini. A resident of New York City, she is an interpreter, translator for the Italian mission to the UN. Angelo Zeolla is a poet from Pelham Bay whose work is shaped by his experiences in the Bronx and his struggles with identity. He is published in Philadelphia Poets and Avanti Popolo, Italian-American Sailing Beyond Christopher Columbus. And finally, Cristina Ali Farah, poet, novelist, playwright, and oral performer, teaches Somali language and culture at Roma Tre University. Her first novel, translated into English as Little Mother, was awarded the prestigious Vittorini Prize. Please, everyone, come.
Litany of desire. Her body is a litany of desires. And I wrap her frail around my body, ribs striped and stretched towards healing. Grotesque, beautiful. These sores, I carry them, fingers sticky and heavy with exactitude. I flay the muscled sacrament with wine and water and bread and worship. I want you litany, like bleeding, like a fire, fanned open like my legs, insistent like fate, like salt, like memory. Tell them to me. Your stories, tender to the touch. This is what I have always wanted from you, the cracked edge of what has just begun to harden. I want you against time and revelation and beds too far away. I want you wanting me, clothed in the absolution of fangs and forks and fucks we shouldn't have. I want you buried in the belly of a blind belief like Jonah, like Apostle, like Mary, like Joseph, like God. I want your spirit made flesh within me, frail and futile. I want to follow you, broken ground you, sound you hoarse from the flick of this foreign tongue like mud and martyr and mornings without sun. I want to quiet you like quick, like cunt, like hollow, like whole. I want to hold you holy, like prayer, like benediction, like intercession, like hallelujah, like hallelujah, like hallelujah, like.
Litania del desiderio, suo corpo, una litania di desideri che avvolgo fragile intorno al mio, costole solcate tese verso la guarigione, grotesche e belle queste piaghe, le porto con me, le dita appiccicose appesantite dalla perfezione, scortica il mio sacramento polposo con il vino e l'acqua e il pane e la venerazione. Ti voglio, litania, come sanguinare, come un fuoco che sbotta spinto dal vento con le mie gambe insistenti, come il destino, come il sale, come il ricordo. Raccontamele le tue storie, sensibile al tatto, è questo ciò che ho sempre voluto da te, il bordo spaccato di ciò che solo ora comincia a inasprirsi. Ti voglio contro il tempo e la rivelazione e i letti troppo distanti. Voglio che tu voglia me vestita nell'assoluzione di zanne, forchette e scopate che non dovremmo fare. Ti voglio sepolta nel ventre di una fede cieca, come Giona, come Apostolo, come Maria, come Giuseppe, come Dio. Voglio la tua anima resa carne nella mia carne. Fragile e futile, voglio seguirti, sverginare il tuo territorio a forza di gridare e farti diventare rauca dallo schiocco della mia lingua straniera, come il fango, come un martire, come il mattino senza sole. Ti voglio acquietare come in fretta, come fica, come cavo, come pieno. Voglio tenerti tra le braccia sante, come una preghiera, come una benedizione, come un'intercessione, come alleluia. Come alleluia, come alleluia, come amen.
Brava.
Litania di desideri. Suo corpo è la litania di desideri e me li metto fiacchi attorno tutto il mio corpo, costole staccate e distese, verso guarnigione, groteschissime e bellissime queste piaghe, me le porto dita untate e pesanti di precisione, pestati il sacramento, con vino e acqua e pane ed adorazione. Io ti voglio litania, tipo sanguinamento, tipo un fuoco soffiato e spalancato, tipo le mie gambe insistenti, tipo il destino, tipo il sale, tipo la memoria. Dimmile le tue storie, si tenere alla carezza. È questo ciò che ho voluto sempre da te, il precipizio spezzato di ciò che si è appena iniziato a seccare. Io ti voglio contro il tempo e la rivelazione e i letti troppo lontani. Io ti voglio a volermi vestita in assoluzione di zanne, forchette e chiavate che non ci dovremmo fare. Io ti voglio infondata nella pancia di una convinzione cieca, tipo Giona, tipo Apostolo, tipo Maria, tipo Giuseppe, tipo Dio. Voglio il tuo spirito fatto carne dentro di me, flacida ed inutile. Voglio seguirti, zappaterennarti, suonarti rauca dal guizzare della mia lingua estranea, tipo fango e martire e mattinate senza sole. Ti voglio tranquillizzare, tipo svelta, tipo figa, tipo vuota, tipo intera. Io voglio tenerti santa, tipo preghiera, tipo benedizione, tipo intercessione, tipo alleluia, tipo alleluia, tipo alleluia, tipo amen.
Il suo corpo è la litania dei desideri e li avvolgo vulnerabili attorno. Il mio corpo, costole rigate e tese verso la guarigione. Grottesche e belle queste piaghe, io le porto, dita umide e pesanti, con precisione svelano tubido il sacramento, col vino, con l'acqua, col pane e con venerazione. Ti voglio, litania, come il sangue, come fuoco soffiato e aperto, e le mie gambe pressanti, come il destino, come il sale, come il passato. Vieni a raccontarmi le tue storie tenere al tatto. Questo è quello che ho sempre voluto da te, involucro rotto di ciò che comincia appena a coagulare. Ti voglio contro il tempo e la rivelazione e giacigli troppo lontani. Voglio che mi desideri, vestita in assoluzione di denti, di punte, di amplessi che non dovremmo avere. Ti voglio sepolta nel ventre di una fede cieca, come Giona, come un apostolo, come Maria, come Giuseppe, come Dio. Voglio il tuo spirito farsi carne dentro di me, fragile e futile. Voglio seguirti, terra diventata polvere, farti risuonare rauca al tocco della mia lingua straniera, come limo, come martire, come mattine senza sole. Voglio farti tacere velocemente, come una troia, come un tempio, interamente. Voglio custodirti, sacra come una preghiera, come una benedizione, intercessione, come alleluia, 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 come amen.
I really need a drink of water after that. I mean, wow. I'm trying to be articulate here. I wish this was something besides water. Anyway, maybe a little whiskey, you know, or rum. When we were speaking earlier today on the phone, you mentioned that you didn't feel a great sense of ownership toward your poetry, unless I misunderstood you. That you were first an activist and then a poet. But when I asked you about publication, you said, "Well, I don't have ownership over these poems," which, in a way, seems almost the opposite of what Najwan was saying.
You know, I'm a share-all kind of girl. You know, people always say, "Oh, I like that poem. Is it published?" And I say, "Email me, I'll send it to you." And anyone can come to any performance of mine and tape it and put it, which is why you have so many YouTube videos. I don't know, I think it's interesting to watch a piece of work become a thing away from you. And in the kind of viral technological age in which we exist, it's an interesting animal. You know, I've had some people do some very interesting responses. I think people often make me sound a lot, you know, Najwan says an intellectual is needed. I think that sometimes people's response to my work makes me feel like there's more room, or at least there's some intellectuality going on in at least their response in the process of this poem. You know, because I don't necessarily feel that brilliant or smart or, you know, I'm an island girl. You know, I was born in 1972, Christmas Day. You said you wouldn't mention birthdays, but I'm a feminist, so the year means nothing. So I'm a country girl, you know, like, you know, you have an apple, you give an apple. You have a poem, you give a poem.
I would almost say that you leave me speechless, but but I'm not very good at being speechless. So.
Good.
Would you like to ask anything of your translators?
I'm fascinated. It's the first time I'm seeing the translations. I'm fascinated with, you know, I don't know enough about Italian to be fascinated with any particular word choice. What I'm fascinated with is the number of variations. It's astounding to me. I thought it was a pretty simple poem. You know, it's somebody in a church somewhere having a moment with their maybe clitoris and God at the same time. Simple, you know. But it's, you know, it's the translation for blood. It's the translation for wine. It's the translation for, you know, why tipo as opposed to come? I mean.
Tipo, I mean, the reason why I use that is because the Italian that I speak is usually...
Microphone, because you guys...
Oh, scusa. Usually the Italian that I use, I mean, I studied it formally, but I grew up in a household that was bilingual. And my Italian, even throughout my travels in Italy, people have always said that my Italiano is very colloquial, very spoken. So tipo was more of just say very spoken, and that's what I was trying to bring to the piece, because I kind of got that vibe just from the first time that I read it, that it was a very, just say, colloquial piece, and I was just astounded at how you were able to just put so much feeling, so much power into such words that were so, I would say, scarce, like scarce, and just say nude. There was just a strength to it and a power to it that I really related to. There was also a very country feel to it, and my family, they're really not from the city in Italy, they're from the mountains, they were farmers. So the one particular line that I tried to translate and that I fought with to translate was just break ground you, zappatere narti, which it's something that I could relate to, because I remember even as a youngster, just say working the land with my parents. And my parents were basically farmers. They really had little education. So, I mean, even the Italian that I spoke was kind of a mix between dialetto, Italiano standard, and what I would like to call, just say, Italiese, which is like a mix of Italian and English. And then you also have, just say, a plethora of dialects that existed in, just say, my neighborhood in the Bronx. You had families that on my block that were Baresi, other families that were Calabresi, other families that were Siciliani, basically mostly from Il Meridione. So when I really translated it, I tried to give it that particular feel, because I kind of had that down-to-earth feel when I first saw the piece.
Cristina, I'm going to ask you to go next, because I'm afraid you're so far over, I'm going to forget you.
Sorry, I didn't.
Well, you yourself are a poet and a spoken word poet.
Mm-hmm.
What do you feel that you brought into this poem, or what did you take out of it?
Yeah, it was a challenge for me, because it's the first time that I translate a poem. So I feel very close to it. I feel it, and somehow I'm very used to translate from Somali to Italian, but it is the first time that I'm translating from English. So there are some words that I completely changed. For example, there is this word hollow that I didn't know how to translate in English, because of course it is a very evocative word in the English poetry, but in Italian doesn't sound very, very pretty, what, or it doesn't mean nothing. So I translated tempio, that is like temple, because of this religious, I don't know, this is like a prayer for me. I like so much it. And I wanted to put into the poetry the sounds that, there are a lot of sounds that it's like a song. So I wanted to keep these sounds in Italian too. So I was concerned to keep the sounds of the original version. So sometimes I betray the poem for...
Yeah.
So what word did you actually settle on, and what does it mean literally in English?
As
For hollow, like hollow.
hollow, tempio, it's temple.
And what
is a place where you pray. It's a place.
Oh, a
it's
temple.
A temple, yeah.
Oh, scheiße.
Yeah, I was in plain English, right? In a way, I mean, because this poem, as you said, Clitoris in the Church, I was thinking, as you said that of Angelo, trying to find his inner clitoris. But I think that you guys sort of, in a way, in your translations too, though, you're sort of running the gamut between the sacred and the profane. And I think, Cristina, you went for the sacred, and Angelo, you went for the profane. I mean, I'm sick. I mean, we share an office, and I'm just going to have to like go in with an ice pack on Monday. Now I know, what her husband sees in her. I mean, can you talk a little bit about your choices, Angela?
Obviously, the
Microphone.
Oh, I'm sorry. Obviously, clearly what you see when you first read it is this continuous back and forth between the sacred and the profane. And, but what I perceived, hopefully correctly, was this molten lava underneath the surface. And I guess because I'm a woman and I'm 43, said my age. So I can relate to certain things and feelings. And what I perceived was what we have to be, you know, good little girls. We're in church and we're praying. And underneath the surface, there's desire, there's passion, there's a lot of things that we'd like to express, but because we have to conform, and because we're in church, we have to be good little girls. And so what I felt was a very passionate feeling, a woman that has desire, a woman that has a lot of things to say. In fact, I just wanted to highlight, I wrote inasprirsi for harden, not because I didn't know that harden means inaridirsi, but, and this is what I perceived, I don't know if it's correct, but I don't think she just shrivels up and dries up and dies. I think that inasprirsi means to become bitter, but not necessarily vindictive. Okay, so in Italian, I wrote that the crack is hardening. It's just about to become bitter. It's just about to inasprirsi, to become harder, bitter. It means that there is a slight crust that's forming, but underneath there's molten lava and even a little bit of venom. But maybe that's me.
It's interesting. I mean, I wrote this when I was about 25.
Okay, so
I wrote this poem at 25, and so I'm looking and listening to you and thinking like, wow, it does make sense within the context of these words. But you know, I wrote this basically. I mean, it's probably more literal than people. You know, I'm a church girl. You know, I grew up in the church. I was Catholic, you know, all day at school, and then I had to go home and be Pentecostal Baptist. So everybody was fucking incanting all the time. Somebody was always in like some kind of religious, you know, orgasm in my child world, but nobody spoke about sex. Right. And so when I was in church and they were doing this thing, it always was, you know, like the fervor, the secrecy, the heat, the closeness, you're giving your body over to, you know, Jesus and Mary and the baby being born and nobody talking about sex. You know, it's all very, very strange. And so when I became an adult who you know, by the time you kind of get through the late teens, all you can think about is sex. You know, I mean, you just, you know, want to have sex all the time. You look at people, and people are sexy even when they're not. You know, your hormones take over.
This happens to Catholic girls a lot, too, I think. Yeah.
So I hear, but I've had a few Baptist girls in my bed as well. So, I mean, to quote you, the Catholic don't have the patent, the monopoly. But it's the way that those two things, I mean, for much of my 20s, the fervor of religion, or in religion, and the fervor in a kind of passion between lovers, you know, the kind of push-pull, the tension of it, and now that I'm a mom and, you know, kind of, you know, on the other side of things, kind of like I'm less, you know, passionate because you have less time for it with a toddler. But you're thinking about, you know, how to create a healthy world for your kid to kind of step into a life where they can be, you know, one day sexual without without waking up in the middle of the orgasm and screaming, "Get off me! My mother told me never to let you touch me." When you start thinking about that structure of trying to do that for a kid, it's the same passion, though, don't you think? I mean, and it's interesting listening to the translations, thinking, my God, like, you know, you all approached it from very different places, and I didn't understand the words, of course, but I knew what they meant, but I was sitting here with my eyes closed and feeling the same thing, just listening to words I didn't understand, you know, because you took what I meant without knowing what I meant and made it into words you knew and spat them back at me, and I was sitting here listening to the very same thing that I wrote. Wild.
And I think one of the things I liked about these three guys is, and you could hear it, for example, in Angelo saying, I don't know if this is correct or not, you know? And Angela comes more from an interpreting direction, where correctness is everything. You know, and I'm always say, fuck correctness, you know, what sounds right, what sounds good in English. Cristina coming from another angle, making the poem a little bit more your own sense of desire, you know, I think shaped this.
Yeah, it is interesting listening for Staceyann, because the first time I read the poem, I just read it, and the second time I thought this is an orgasm. I thought this is an orgasm, and
the second time.
Yeah, it
Okay.
was. it is beautiful, and so it was so moving for me. It was really, my mother too is Catholic, so there are some things that I was not allowed to speak about. So there are some words that, like fuck, I wasn't able to translate it exactly in Italian the same way. So I translated it amplessi.
Molto elegante,
yeah.
infatti.
And yeah,
You
it's
went-
very
yeah.
elegant. Yeah. And so it was.
Yeah. Could we have some lights on? Because I'm sure the members of the audience, I know that there are a few Italians, and I also would, I guess, have to say, would any of the three of you be considered like Italiano doc? You know, I mean, in a way. I mean, like, for example, that's what. Well, actually, doc. This is how weird Italian is. Doc is what you use as a label on wine. On wine. It means that you know where it came from. And then, and then when they're talking about sort of high Italian, and Italian is a very unforgiving language in literary Italian. And it's something I think that a lot of the young writers are really fighting against, this sort of the weight of the past and of tradition and of, like, I think it's much less of a problem in English, although you wouldn't know it talking to editors and copy editors and stuff, right? But I think in Italian, certainly in school, there's this, like, that's not Italian, you're always getting told. You know, did you get much of that, Cristina, or?
Yes.
And today still, do you get it?
Yes, because about the Italian, because I grew up in Somalia, so but I attended an Italian school, so Italian was not my first language, but my mother language, of course, because my mother is Italian. And when I moved to Italy after the Civil War, I thought that everybody will recognize that my Italian was my mother tongue, but it wasn't. So, yeah, and...
Yeah, same question to you, Angela?
I mean...
No, Angela. Actually, we've got a kind of Victor Victoria thing going on tonight, too. With
Angela and Angela. My history, you mean?
Well, just with Italian language and just that pressure. See, because I don't even try to go there.
I moved to Italy when I was 15, 16, and when I was in the States growing up, I went to a Catholic school, and I was the go-to person for Italian, because we had, like, Italian maybe twice a week in grammar school. And I thought I knew Italian fluently, and then when I moved to Italy, and I was riding on my motorino with my friends, and they were talking to me, I realized that I did not speak it fluently, and they, you know, make fun of me and call me l'americana, whatever, and that was the end of that. So I studied hard, and I lived more in the north, though, so I don't know if I can say that my Italian is Italian doc.
Yeah, no, it's just one of those weird things.
It definitely has a northern influence, but...
Yeah. Questions from the audience? To Natalia? Yeah. I knew it.
Just a curiosity, and I have a question for the first two translators. It's about the beginning of the poem. Why did you decide to renounce to the use of the article il? For me, her body is the litany of desires. The translation, the immediate translation is il suo corpo è la litania dei desideri, which means the third translation. But you decide to get rid of the article. Why?
I mean, as for me, I wanted to just make it as colloquial as possible. I mean, I understand that. In a sense, I don't see myself as un Italiano doc, just to even refer to speak in regards to just what that was. I'm more of un oriundo, or you could even say Italo-Americano, in un certo senso. My family, they were really just from humble beginnings, and I really just did not put the article because I wanted to make it as colloquial sounding as possible. And even if I ran the risk of sounding, just say, incorrect, even in a certain way, for not using the article, because I was well aware of, I kind of fought with this as well, because in a certain sense, even when I'm in my house and we speak, and I speak with just say my siblings or even with my mother, and we kind of go back and forth and we switch code. And even if I'll speak in standard Italian in one battuta, and then throw, just say, even a piece of dialect, and my mother, even though she really didn't go even into high school, even into university, she'll always make a face if I use a word from just say the dialect, like, as opposed to saying oggi, I'll say oi, or even instead of saying domani, I'll say cry. And she's like, these aren't even words that I used. She's just like, these are words that the old people use. But in a sense, in Italy now, when I went to go there and study, and even when I went to go live in just say what would be considered my zona, because I too am a dual citizen, I began to just notice that usually amongst just say i ragazzi, the boys, the guys, they would speak in dialect. Le femmine però, they would speak standard Italian because it was considered low to speak dialect. And me, I kind of always oscillated between those two, that side, either to speak standard, to speak dialect, or to even speak Italiese. It's just, I've always struggled with that particular part of just say identity.
I didn't even realize that I made this mistake, because obviously, correctly, it is. It's so
You're calling it a mistake again, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I have issues. I have to go see a psychologist. But
we have a shrink in the audience. In case
well, we'll meet later. Suo corpo. The reason why, though, I started suo corpo is because, to me, I imagined the person looking at a body like as a projection of an image. And to me, that was it, suo corpo. Like when you talk about philosophical concepts in English, a lot of Italians say, why don't you put the the? Why don't you put the the? And I said, well, if it's a philosophical concept, if it's a concept, sometimes you don't need the. You don't need the article. And I think that's what I did. I calqued, actually, from the English concept. So I just, boom, suo corpo.
And there's also, I think, another principle in play here, which I think you have to give yourselves more credit. And not just biographical, because I think there's a tendency in translation to clean things up. A sort of decorum creeps in. Translators in the audience will know, having worked with editors and stuff, that maybe you are trying to capture something really colloquial, and in they come and they say, that's not standard English.
Right.
I have a question. I'm not quite sure, the language of it, I tried my best to stay close to what I remember, Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now at the hour of our death, amen. So there's a way that I don't quite understand what about it you understand or feels colloquial to you, because in my girlhood, in my decades ago of Catholic, purity. It was very formal language, we didn't sit around and be like, yo, Jesus, what up, I mean, when you're talking to Mary, you had to be, full ass decorum, So I don't understand. And I'm not criticizing, I only want to understand, because it's interesting to me that you read it as that. And to me, it's like my most contained self in the church using this language.
I understand what you mean by that, because I too grew, when I went to Catholic school in the Bronx. But there were American Catholics and there were Italian Catholics. And Southern Italian Catholics are very, how should I put it? We'd celebrate our feast day, and our feast day is coming up, la festa della Madonna d'Abbondanza, which is just every town in Italy has a saint, and usually the Blessed Mother is probably one of the most.
So the incantations, are they different? Like if you are saying, you know, if you're saying, you know, let's go with the Hail Mary, because that's, you know, like a hit song.
Well, I mean,
how does it sound? Do you use the same words?
It is very solemn, but my type of spirituality has always been within the family, and even my spirituality has been like I can remember.
So you just rebelled then, basically.
Yes.
Okay.
Ultimately, yes. It was really just that. But I mean, even I can remember at an early age, my Catholicism was experienced not only in Italian, because my grandmother, my Nonna Maria Antonia, would basically sit at her radio listening to Radio Maria, and she would basically take me as a youngster and just explain to me about how when we pass, andavamo a vedere Gesù Cristo, tutto ciò, and all of that. And it just, she would essentially say this to me in her dialect. And my dialect really, you can't even say it's Napoletano. It's really even to a point, because we're from the mountains. We're Provincia di Benevento, but it's all the way in the mountains, all the way to the.
Very interesting, because I grew up speaking, you know, like most of the community around me spoke Patois, which is a Jamaican dialect, which is a kind of pidgin to English, a kind of broken English, if you listen really carefully. And if you're not listening carefully, it just sounds like an entirely different language. And so, but we never prayed in that language or ever. It was never, you know, the language of religiosity, you know, never at all. Every time we came to Mary, it was like straight up standard English, tenses right, you know, adjectives matching with the fucking proverb, you know, verbs.
But I don't imagine that in church you said.
No, not those.
Okay. Next question. Here in the front.
I didn't think this was going to be fun, but it's fun.
On the second box, the last line that says, like memory. I took a few years of Italian, so I think memory will translate more appropriately to memoria. But why do you two ladies chose to translate it to ricordo and passato? Because to me, ricordo is like remembering something, and passato is the past, right? But I feel like that's different than memory.
Well, would you like to go first? I actually backtracked because when I read after that, I don't have the original, but I know she says at a certain point, tell me your stories.
Yes.
And at that point, I had put memory, and then I backtracked and I said, no, these are ricordi, because she's asking her stories, and that's how I interpreted it.
But doesn't memory have that kind of recollectiveness in English also? When you say memory, you know, tell me your memories. It's, you know, recall for me. It's the way that like one word in one language can house many things. But I don't know if you know, I don't know enough about Italian, but I know that.
But actually, ricordi is a very potent word in Italian poetry. Certainly, I mean, it just resonates right through it. Cristina, the same question.
Passato, yeah, it's same answer. I think passato because it's what
Closer to the mic, please.
happened. Yeah, sorry. So passato, it's your experience. Yeah. So I think that I have the same.
We're basically saying the same thing with different words.
It's never the same thing if it's different words. Never.
More questions. Nahi here in the red behind. Yeah, right behind you.
I actually have to apologize about asking questions because I don't know. I know Italian, but I don't know it well. I just thought it's so wonderful to have two angels and a Cristina translating a poem about orgasm. I thought that's wonderful. My question is for Cristina. You also have a different word for that you use, Troia, which I've heard this word in Italian. Two different spellings. And I understand that you use the word
hollow, you use the word tempio.
Last page.
Then I understand. But could you explain Troya? The word Troya for.
Yeah.
And could you please explain
And
the
what's
word
a
different
speaker?
spellings? And also, I'm a shy person, so I say the English.
The different spelling.
Yeah. As I said, as the word passato, Troia, I choose these two words for the sound of the word itself. Troia means.
You can say it.
Yeah, you can say it. Scienza poetica.
Good.
No?
What does it mean in English? Is it cunt?
Yeah, it's a cunt.
No, it's a slut. It's a.
These words are very specific.
Yes.
Especially when you start talking about, like, you know, what the vaginal
Right,
shoot off
that
things
area,
mean.
yes.
You know, like cunt, pussy, you know, they're all different.
Right.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness, the whole angel. They fell, these angels fell.
More questions? Najwan, are you still here? Is he? I'm sure you have a question. Please, Najwan. I would like to hear a comment from you, poet to poet. Because he was asleep. The microphone? Yeah.
It's about this spoken word poetry. Because I think it has to do with performing. So when you translate this text, did you took in consideration that it's gonna be performed? Did you take this in consideration? How do spoken word poetry translated? And this is also because for me it's always a writing and performance art. So translating it should be something different than translating a usual poem, isn't it? This is my question for the translators.
I think we're about to have our first fight.
Why?
Because, you know, you I don't know, Shakespeare was made to be spoken, right? I mean, he wrote to be spoken out loud, right? Yes, but the institution is always going on, like, you know, I mean, buried up Shakespeare's butt talking about how great he was, but, you know, and nobody says, oh, you know, nobody calls Shakespeare a spoken word poet. This poem, you know, it happens on paper, and I write it on paper. I didn't write it to read it out loud. I mean, I write a lot of things, and a lot of them work out loud if you know, kind of, if you're a little bit theatrical, like I tend to be sometimes. But I think that there's a divide that goes on all the time between the work that is supposedly supposed to be on paper and the one that is for the ear. And I think that people make a decision about what is supposed to be on paper and what works on paper. And I don't know, I think if you gave me, if you gave me one of your poems and I read it out loud, I mean, I think that I would, you know, get jiggy with it as well. Because, you know, I'm working really hard for people to understand what, you know, the theatrics of the piece, or, you know, to kind of make it come alive, which is a different experience from them going home and tucking their feet underneath them in a chair and reading it. But I think, you know, I don't know if I'm a good poet, you know. Most days I don't think so. But I think that I write poems that I imagine people will go away and read as well, and pretty much the same. I think that there's value in it being read alone and quietly inside one's head as much as there is for it being read out loud. And so I'm half jesting when I say I'm having a fight with you, because I think, and the fight also extends to you as well. because I think the institution, the very stuffy institution that, you know, the gatekeepers of poetry make a lot of fuss about who is supposed to be a spoken word poet and who is a page poet. And if you happen to read your work well, they don't like you. Because you're supposed to be, you know, quietly and respectfully, you know, reading your work quietly and being intellectual and trying to look, behaving with some decorum and looking demure.
In translation, I think it's a very real distinction. And it's also, Angela can tell you, for example, even in terms of training, I mean, we have interpreters, we have translators, we have one training which is for the ear, one that is for the eye. And in poetry, the two have to come together. But I agree with you completely
but
that...
Isn't that true for any poet that is going to be read out loud?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you took, you know, Derek Walcott, who you can't call him a spoken word poet, right? If you took his poem like Shabin, you know, and where it's repetitive, or you have the word Shabin coming up quite a bit, and there's rhyme, and there's like, you know, language that happens, you know, colloquial language from Trinidad or from St. Lucia. And if you read it out loud, and, you know, if you're translating it, and if you're reading it out loud to a group, wouldn't you have to listen? Doesn't the music of the poem, how it comes out of your ear, how it goes into your ear, doesn't that matter as much as when it's on a page?
Absolutely. No disagreement here. No disagreement. But I was wondering how the translators approach that issue.
Honestly, I was thinking about the rhythm, the metrics. I was thinking about that, and I wanted to respect yours as a translator / interpreter. I knew that there was a crescendo, and there was a point, you know, there was a point where it was solemn and quiet. This is what I heard reading the original. Mm-hmm. I heard your voice. I didn't think it was written necessarily to be read, but I didn't think it was necessarily to be spoken or performed. I just thought of it as the voice in your head. And I tried to follow that flow of thought.
But, you know, I thank you for saying that, because there is a way, I think that it's written into it, you know, it's not, lots of people when they, you know, this is not the first time in a translation where people are like, you know, you have to go to YouTube and see what she does, or you have to listen to her read it first. And that is not a normal response, which sometimes I feel like, it's a bit of a compliment about how well you read, but it's also a dig at whether the thing is not valuable sitting there on the page.
Yeah, but you were the first one to say that your stuff isn't published, you just release it to people.
Well, I mean, it is published in places. I'm saying that I don't necessarily, you know, this poem is published in maybe like 10 places, but I'm saying that the whole notion of telling people where to find it in publication, I feel like the poem, I don't necessarily feel like I own the thing. I, you know, send it out to the world because I'm an activist, not because I feel that the work isn't, you know, publication worthy. You know.
Yeah. Cristina, since you were also involved in sort of some of the same discourse, could you talk about that?
Yes, I think that is somehow when you read something is impossible to hear. You hear a voice, of course, but this voice is always different. I think that is like in a relation. When you read a book, when you speak with somebody, you have a different feeling of his voice, of what he is talking about. So when you read or when you are listening to a poem, it's always your own interpretation. Also, the voice, I think, I don't know if it was clear what I wanted to say.
I was also sort of wondering about your own work as a poet, which, like in the bio that I found of you, sort of described you as oral performer.
Yeah, I started to perform my poems because I was shy. So when I have this problem, when I was in front of the people, I wanted to say a lot of things, and I wasn't able to speak at all. So I started to to read my poems, and it was very important for me because interpreting was somehow a way to say something without being afraid of saying those things. So,
Angelo? Because you were described, initially presented to me as a rapper, sort of.
Well,
so.
I mean, my influences hip hop. What Staceyann was saying before about just say written as opposed to spoken. The thing about my poetry is that it's very spoken because even as a youngster, even just say when I started to study Italian poetry, it was one thing to read it to yourself, but I always came out of the background because Italian, even in terms of just say education, instruction, it's very oral based. You give your exam, and when they say giving your exam, or when you basically give a particular presentation, it's really, they respect things that come more off the cuff in a certain way, that if you have it memorized. Even just say the things that my parents would say to me as a youngster, even when I was studying, even when I had to just say learn, just say catechism or anything like that, to even just go into the spiritual realm, they would always insist on me memorizing it, because when they would go to school, they would go to the lesson, the teacher would point them out and say, okay, recite these lines from Leopardi. And Leopardi is probably, just say, one of the greatest Italian poets and one of the biggest figures that I've even heard. And I mean, it was one thing to always read, just say Italian poetry, but to hear it recited, it gives it another life to a certain sense. So I think the way that I've experienced poetry has always been in that particular realm. You could read it, but you give it another dimension when you take it to the spoken level.
But you are reading something that someone else has put a tremendous amount of work to create.
True.
You know, like, you know, it's not, you know, sometimes I flinch a little when, you know, people say, oh, you know, you're a hip hop artist, or
yes,
because there is, within the tradition of improvised performance, the improvisation happens between the poems. Right. The things I happen to present as poems, I've spent lots of time, and each word has been considered and scratched out and revised and rethought, and so I think that I often, you know, and maybe it is a chip on my shoulder, but I often hear a lack of understanding of that process. Because I know the poem from top to bottom doesn't mean that it's not written down somewhere and that I didn't fight with each word and, you know, agonize over every word.
Sure. No, I mean, no. This is why I said at the beginning that I'm horrible at introductions, because I was very uncomfortable with this terminology. But what has happened to me personally in translating poetry is when I've done it from a page, and then when I heard the poet read it in public, formal poets, all kinds of poets, it became something else completely different than what I expected, you know, and I think...
I suspect that's true for everything.
Absolutely. You've been wonderful. You've been a great audience. I think that our time is up. Thank you all. There's 2 more days of the Penn Festival. Check out the programs that are available, I believe, in the lobby, and have a great night.